so today we will start with new chapter 9, I believe. It's start to discuss classes. And I'm not sure in your Java version CS1, have you already learned a class? And if you have already learned, probably we can go over kind of quickly. And if not, maybe I need to start slowly. Have you already learned like how to create a class and then create an instance, those concepts? You learned a little bit. Okay, and okay, then let's start. So probably I just start, okay, fresh, fresh your memory. Let me do share screen. And I will start today, try with the whiteboard. No, I got to the wrong thing. Hold on, let me stop sharing. I need to share, not a whiteboard, yeah, because otherwise I cannot draw. Okay, now I have the whiteboard. So what today we will start is, I believe in your textbook, it's chapter 9. About discussion about class, is it? And in our previous a couple of classes, we saw scanner, is it? And at that time, I said it's a class. Is it basically you also learned string, is it? It's also class. And but those are class from Java, is it? And what we will learn is how do we create, customize, so create our own class. Our own class. Okay, and generally speaking, class is kind of like a blueprint, okay? So you can view it like this. It's a blueprint for a category of objects. Is it assuming like you define car? So car, this is a concept. It's kind of it's just whenever we see this, you won't associate with some specific car. Is it, you know, okay, you learn English word, the car is some definition, is it has 4 wheels and you can drive, is it? So basically this describe some general characteristic of this moving machine, is it? So car is a definition, is it? And then with it, and you and the Ford is a car manufacturer, is it? And Toyota, and they are car manufacturer. And they produce cars, is it? So those are physical cars, those are physical exist. Is it? And we can call it, so over here in our term, we can call it an object of a car. Is it an object of car? And so over here in our term, then we say, okay, car, we said it's a class. It's a class, and this class is a blueprint for what? For this category of moving machines that have 4 wheels and run on gasoline or electricity, and people can drive, is it? So that's the concept, is it? It's a car. And then, like I just also explained, and then those manufacturers, is it? They produce car, and then we as a customer buy cars, is it? So you all have your cars, is it? So each of your cars, they are considered as what? They are considered as car class instances, or we call it objects. So this is a two different concept, okay? So one concept is called class. So class, it's logically, it's just a blueprint. There is no physical object there, is it? And there is another concept here is called instance or objects, is it? And those we call physically exist. Later on, we will see what does this mean, is it? So physically exist. So it's some real objects, is it? And you can drive on it. You cannot drive on the blueprint, on the piece of paper, but you can drive your car, is it? So that's called physical class. Okay, so this is just a general idea. So over here, so regarding class, then we have the concept of its definition, as we already understand, and then objects, or we call it instance. Is it this two physically exist? Is it? So generally speaking, then, okay. So over here, what we are going to discuss is customized class. So we create our class, like the scanner. And generally speaking, so just think about your car. Is it car? Car, suppose over here is a class, is it? So for that car class, it has some physical components. Is it like its engine, a wheel, is it? And something else, is it? And so in our programming language, generally we call those physical components, and even something else, not necessarily all physical, okay? Some logical things can also be, we call them some fields. Okay, class fields. Okay, and but you see, for your car, is it like your car? You can drive your car, is it? So it's a verb here, is it? And you can accelerate. So it's a verb, is it? And you can decelerate. That's also a verb, is it? So what are all of those? Those are operations, is it? So class operations. So generally speaking, a class, whenever we see a class, it has two parts. The fields parts and the operations parts. Okay. And the operation means some actions, is it? And also, generally speaking, regarding like for class, a lot of time we call fields attributes. So you will see this term also a lot, attributes. So whenever people say, oh, class attribute, that means basically they're fields. Or sometimes we call them members. Okay. Members. And for operations, a lot of time you will also see they call it behaviors. Okay. And all like member functions, methods, whatever, is it? And also for class, is it for class? And like a scanner class, or like the string class. So far, we have learned this two, is that you use this two. And if I ask you about this two, just think about, do you know their physical components? Do you know their components, their fields? You don't know, is it? What you know is you just call their function. Is it like a dot next function? Is it next int function? Is it all strings? Some functions, is it? So you know how to operate on them. How, for some reason, why we know how to operate on those instance, is it? And also, whenever you call those you call those functions, you need to call on the instance. Is it? Later we will see that. But anyway, you only get exposed to those methods, is it? So in class, even though you have these two fields, and normally the fields parts are hidden, you cannot see, is it? Operation parts, they are public available, is it? So generally speaking, we also say, okay, the operations is what? Is provide an interface. So it serves as a purpose of the interface, is it? For clients to operate on. Is it serve the purpose? But the fields part is completely hidden, okay? So that's just a general idea about the two components. Okay, but then let's come back in Java class. In Java class, we also have these two parts. Okay, and generally speaking, we call the private part, we call them what? We call them instance instance variables. Instance variables. Okay, and we may also say class variables. And both, basically all of this is what I just mentioned, fields. Okay, fields, but they are called over here in Java, we call them instance variables, class variables, and they are hidden because they are hidden, and I use a minus sign to represent they are hidden, okay? Hidden, okay. And in Java class, like I said, you also see a lot of methods. Is it like a scanner, like string? Is it we use? So even for car, you can drive, you can accelerate, you can decelerate. Those are provide interface. Is it? Or we call them operations. Is it member operations? Or interface or behaviors? Is it? Of those, and generally speaking, we call them what? Instance methods here. Or, and in Java, we also have class methods. And normally, that's just not all the time, okay? Normally, we use the plus sign to represent when we draw this kind of diagram, okay? And they are public. Because like I said, basically they provide an interface, is it, for clients to work on, okay? So just remember over here, okay, we have hidden, and hidden basically another more formal terminology is we call it private. So normally we set Java class instance variables, especially with instance variables, as private. Okay, and we set instance methods and class methods. That's just general cases, okay, as public. Okay, and over here we said private, public. Those are keyword. Later on you will see in Java class definition. Those are Java keywords. Java keywords. Okay, and what they represent? They represent the visibility, or we call accessibility. So who can access it? How visible it is it? So that's a kind of concept, okay. Okay, so here we have general idea. So whenever you define a class, you need to have two parts, okay. One part is, we call them instance variables, class variable parts. The second part is, and normally they are private. The second part is regarding operations, is we can have instance methods and class methods, okay? And generally speaking, they are public, okay? So this is just, I just gave you a very general idea, okay, about class. And then next, I first give you some idea about our class. The first example we will go over is about a time class. A time class, okay. And generally speaking, in software engineering process, okay, whenever you define a class, you start with a UML diagram definition. Okay, so let's see what that is. So you draw some box like this. And this box will have two parts, okay? So normally the top part regarding the instance variable, class variable, and so instance variable, and this part is regarding instance methods. Okay, instance method. Okay, then let's see this example. So it's a rectangle, okay. UML represents universal markup language. Universal markup language. We also know HTML is also markup language. So this is also, we call it markup language. It's mostly used for software engineering, okay. So anyway, here we borrow this. And for our time class, just think about it. Whenever you represent time, what do we care about? We care about it's an hour, it's a minute, and if it's morning, AM or PM. Is there some those kind of information? Is it? Okay, so for the time class, then we need some field for hour. Suppose I call it M hour. Is it? And we also interested, so what's the type to represent hour? Generally, we use integer, is it? And it's a private, so I mark as minus sign. And we also interested in what? In minute. So I write as M minute, and then colon. And what's the type? It's also integer, is it? And what else we are also interested as AM or PM. So I write as M, AM, and PM. Is it? And what's the type? It's just a single letter will serve A or P. Is it? So I can write as character. Is it? So you see this top part of the box, I define three instance variables. For our time class, is it? I define the instance variable name and their type, is it? Okay, and then we move on to assuming we have this and we can deal with the class, okay? And after we finish define instance variable, we move on to the instance method definition, okay? So regarding instance method for class, and normally every class needed to have something called a constructor. Constructors, okay. Constructors, the purpose is what? Is to create objects. Create an object with what? With initialized values for instance variables. That's its purpose. Okay, as to how it look like, we will discuss that. Okay, so it will lead to our example. And for the time class, just think about your clock or your watch. Is it? You can view what? You can view its hour. You can view its minute. Is it? And in the morning or in the afternoon. Yeah. So basically, you will know all three fields. Is it? So what kind of operation can provide that? Generally speaking, we call them getters. Getter, okay, or get function. A lot of time we also have, we call them accessors. You will see getters, accessors, get one, they are all the same meaning. Okay, so first let's see, we want to know the hour information. So you can name that method as get hour. And it's a method, is it? And you will know, you want to know the return type of this method. And it should be consistent with the instance variable, so it's an integer. And it's public, is it public? Okay, same thing, you can define like a get minute. Is it? And the return type is also integer. Is it? So that's, so the purpose of those getters or accessors is used to retrieve the values of instance variable. That's its purpose, okay. And, but you see, for your watch or your clock, you can do it. You can also set their hour, their minute, everything, is it? And generally speaking, we call them setters. Setter, or we call them what? Mutator. Mutator, or just general set functions or set methods. Okay, and in this case, suppose we have a function, we call it set time. And set time, then you want to set about what? You need to set hour, minute, AM, and PM, all three, is it? Then you need to have what? You need to have parameter, is it? Suppose I call it P hour, parameter hour, and integer parameter minute, is it? Oh, and a char, parameter AM and PM, is it? And normally the return type is void, is it? So those, you can also specifically have like a set hour, set minute, etc. Okay, but anyway, the purpose of those functions, of the set function is to assign some value through parameter to your instance variables. Okay, so in this case, int p hour. So the purpose of it is to assign values to instance variables. Okay, that's their purpose. So getter and the set. And generally speaking, get function, the parameter list is empty. set function set say you are going to assign values. Where are you going to get the values? Through parameter, etc. So that's easy to understand, is it? So set function, generally speaking, they need parameters. Okay, so after you finish this, and this is just a very simple one, okay, you finish this UML diagram. If you finish this UML, then you can start write your code. So what we will do is, let's take a look of a code. So I have this Java code. Okay, so now let's take a look. So I create, so if you take a look at my project, this project, I call it Java class example 1, is it? And I have, we can skip, we have 2 Java files in this case. So this time is different from our previous discussion. Okay, we have 2 Java files. And we have a file called time.java. Okay, so this is our class, time class, that we just called. And in this case, to create a class, generally speaking, okay, normally you define the class, the accessibility as public, and followed by class keyword, and then name of the class. Name of class. Is it? And then you have starting curly brackets, and we have, at the end, we have the corresponding ending curly brackets. Is it? And then within it, let's take a look. Is it? Over here, I should write, I should follow the camel case. Is it? I should write as m_hour. That's Java. M_minute. But of course, that also works. Okay, it's just not very professional. Okay. Normally, Java prefer camel case. Camel case. Okay, and for your variables. And here, if you put the M, the purpose I put M to represent is the represent member, because they are anyway member variables. Okay, over here we don't call them member, we call them, so all 3 of this are called what? Instance variables. Be careful, they are called variable, but they are not the variable that you learned before. Okay, this is called instance variable, because this hour, minute, and AM, PM, they belong to time class. Not like if we have that void main function, is it? Over there you define integer I. Is it? This I is called what? This is called a local variable. Is it? And this variable is only visible in main. Is it? So that's different. Okay, this is called instance variable. Okay, they belong to specific class. Okay, so over here we have this 3 variable, instance variable. We also define their type. But before that, did you see we have the keyword called private? So this corresponding to our minus sign. Is it the minus sign? So they are private, okay. And later on we will explain why they are private here, okay. So anyway, that's the 3 instance variables. So those are 3 instance variables. Here we define, is it? And over here, you may see another one, it's called number of times. Okay, you may ask what that is, and it's also private as a type. So nothing new here, but just have this special keyword. static. Okay, and I give you the general idea about this. Okay, so with this specific keyword static, then that means this is not instance variable. This is called a class variable. Okay, so class variable, there is difference between class variable and the instance variable. And if you think really, really hard now, just pay attention to the keyword. Is it why we call it instance variable, why we call it class variable. So I may leave this as a thinking point for you. Okay, just think about it. Okay, so that's so this part is the definition part for what? For the attributes definition. As generally we set private for attribute and we hide them. Is it? And this private, you hide it. Is it? So basically this is called what? Information hiding. Okay, information hiding. And so one big part in this code is OOP, okay? And then when you look for a job, maybe interview, they will ask you this question. OOP, what does that mean? That means object-oriented programming. Okay, what is object-oriented? So it's everything is regarding objects, is it? So that's why it's called object-oriented program. And the object-oriented, they have a number of pillars or features, we say. And one of the features, there is a fancy word related with it. It's called encapsulation. Encapsulation. This is one of a major feature for OOP, okay, encapsulation. What is encapsulation? Encapsulation is information hiding, okay? And what is information hiding is, oh, you hide your instance variables. You don't expose them. You make them private, okay? That's called encapsulation. And what is this? How it acts later on, we will see, okay, through our example. Okay, so we understand instance variables. And then the next part, move to operations. Is it? So all operations. And all operations general, that's just very general, they are public, is it? And they are public, that's because they provide the interface for external world, for clients to do something on it, is it? Just think about it. Okay, for acceleration, is it? If the car manufacturer hide the acceleration functionality, how are we going to accelerate our car? Is it? There is no way, is it? So you do need to provide that interface to us, is it? To accelerate the car, is it? So that makes sense. Okay. And then let's see. And then regarding operations, normally, generally speaking, the very first thing you need to think about is constructor. Constructor. Okay, constructor. And what is a constructor? Constructor in Java, basically, it's just a method.
I got a question.
Yeah, please. Please, very good.
What's the difference between like a class variable and just like creating a variable like we have in the past, like we did for our last.
Okay.
So I can see that, like, I don't understand the point of putting the private int. Like, does that make it more usable, or does that Can you explain that a little bit?
Okay. Let's see how. So right now, you see, right now, this is just a class definition. Within this class, there is no main method. That just keep this in mind. Okay, and this is just for the definition of certain category of objects, like a car, like a watch, like a clock, like a furniture, like a room, etc., like a people, employee, of this. It's just the definition of certain certain objects, etc. And what we can view mean, basically you can view mean as the whole word, is it? And in mean, then you can have your car driving there, is it? And Simo also got like the school running there, is it? All of this of a daily life basically kind of it happens in main, is it? In main. And then so the main, we can say like the real world life, is it? Then in the real world life, you have a variable, is it? Suppose you wanted to do some counting things. Then over there, you can declare a variable integer I equals 0, is it? So that is just a variable within that, or what we can, how about let me do this. Let's go back to the other. I needed to hold on. Okay, let me go.
So when you define them in the class, then they
yeah,
can
just
be
you go
referenced.
ahead. Yeah.
Then they can be referenced when you use the class, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When you define the class, exactly. You got it? We define the car, is it? But in the real life, you need a Ford to manufacture the specific car, then you buy from the dealer.
Gotcha.
That makes sense?
So when we do the import scanner, we're really just importing a class that has a whole bunch of stuff defined in it that allows us to get input from the user, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. That
Okay.
you import scanner, but be careful is that scanner is I don't know who you are. Okay, your first name. If you let me know for then I can see that scanner is your scanner. That makes sense? And suppose in main, Alex can also create Alice scanner. Then Alex scanner can called scanner Alex scanner. Bradley can also create. So Bradley scanner is called Bradley scanner.
Right, and it might have different functions and different defined objects.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense now.
Yeah.
And within scanner right now, I explained it. You don't know scanner's instance variable is what. You don't know, is it? Because it's hiding. You cannot see it. What they give you is they tell you, okay, there is such class. What you can do is you can call the next integer, next float, next double, next character, whatever. That makes sense. You can only do those things. As to what's inside, you don't need to know. That's what they think.
I have a question too. So there's, what does static mean? Like we have private int and private static int. What's the difference between
that's
those?
what I let's get I need to, so first let me explain a little bit more about what he just asked. Is it this is the main, then I will come back to explain the stat. This is main method, is it? And every app needs to have this main entry point in operating system to make your app run, is it? You need this. This is the entry point. Okay, and then suppose in this main, I define integer I equals 10. Like I said, this I is a local variable in main. Okay, in main. That makes sense? And like in our, let's see. Not to stop share. Okay, and then let's see. This I define int and the local. It's local to who? To main. Is it? And in my this function, if I want to do system.print I, will this be allowed? No. Is it? It's not accessible. Is it? This local variable, its scope limited to who? Limited to main method. Okay, other function cannot access it. Okay, so that's the key point here. Okay, and we can expand more. Okay, suppose in main, I have, so variable scope, this is a very important concept, scope, okay. Suppose in main, then I have some block. You can try that. You can just have a pair of brackets, and then within the pair of brackets, suppose you do char C equals A. And then this variable C's scope limited to what? Limited to this pair of brackets. Outside, if you try to do, okay, system.out.println, whatever, that's C, it will not let you run because this variable only visible within this pair of brackets. Okay, so its scope is what? The scope is called block scope. It's not a function scope anymore. It's even more limited. Now that makes sense? So this kind of variable, it's kind of, you know, the function, you can think about that function is just everyday life. Is that within certain period, like right now, right now what we are doing is CS265 Zoom class. Is it? So this I is only visible during this time. After this time, then it's gone. You cannot access. But that variable, clear everything, and then let's see. Go back to the time. The time, those three variables, they are not, they have nothing to do with our class. They are not just live within our class. This is called three instance variable. They are always exist with the object. It's kind of like your car engine, is it? Your car engine will always be with your car unless you sell your car. Is it? Otherwise, always with your car, or unless that car is broken. It's gone. Is it? That engine is always with it. It doesn't matter it's during our Zoom time, or you at night you sleep, or in the morning you eat breakfast. It's always there. That makes sense now. The variable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, then the next question is about this specific static, is it? And this static is, so this number of times, this is not instance variable. This is called a class variable. So class variable, it doesn't belong to any specific object. Okay, so this just a kind of like, it doesn't belong to your car or my car or Alex's car, Bradley's car, is it? It belongs to what? It belongs to that car class. Okay, suppose who define the car class? So suppose American Car Association, is it? American Car Association is the owner of the car class definition. And the American Car Association wanted to know totally how many cars right now in the whole world created. Is it by this many manufacturers? Then it can define this class variable called the number of cars so that it can keep track. So no matter your car, then it's going to keep working on that number. That makes sense? That's called class variable. It doesn't belong to specific object. Don't worry too much. Temporarily, if you still feel confused, don't worry, because later on in our example, after I explain the example, you will fully understand it regarding our code. Does this make sense now? Generally speaking.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So I think today that we are close to the end of our class. So I don't think I will add